Okay, so this will be the introductory video for how to throw a pot. So I'm using porcelain clay, which is not the normal everyday clay. So I hope that it's easy to see in the video. I guess I'll find out. The first thing you want to do is prepare your clay, and I'm going to have a separate video on that. But this clay has been wedged and it's been pounded into a ball shape, and also it's been weighed. It's approximately 1 pound, plus or minus just a little bit. Now you want to take the clay and you want to attach it to the wheel head. On the wheel head you see that there is this orange surface, which is actually a plate that goes on there. This is called a bat. The bat attaches with these pins. Sometimes it's a little challenging to get them aligned, but there it goes. And so that gives you a protective surface for the wheel head, and it's nice and flat, and it's easy to transport to another place when you're done. So the first thing I need to do now, I've got the bat, I've got the clay, and I want to attach the two. So just like that. Throw it down, you try to get it in the center. That looks pretty good. If it's a little bit off, you can just nudge it over, spin it slowly and just kind of nudge it a little bit, and it'll be fine. So I'm getting a little bit of water. The wheel head is dry and the clay is dry, and that's necessary for it to stick. So it's stuck pretty good. Now I've got a little bit of water on there, and what I want to do now is to condition the clay and get it centered, which will prepare it for making a pot. So what I'm going to do, notice that I have my elbows anchored onto my legs, onto my knees, and I'm approaching the clay first with my left hand, and I'm pushing right along, straight along the axis of my arm to the center of the clay right here. You want to keep a few drops of water on that at all times, keep it slippery. With my left hand, I'm just pushing inward. Normally my hands would be more around it, but just trying to show. Now a couple drops of water, and I'll use my right hand as kind of a backstop. My left hand is still pushing the clay forward to the center. And when I do that, it naturally rises up, and that's good. So you bring anything that is slightly off center, comes up directly to the center right at the top. Once you've got this cone extended up, you want to bring it back down. So I'm just going to take my left hand and I'm going to bring the heel of my thumb right up to this top point here. And if I'm looking at a clock face looking down, this is somewhere around 7 o'clock, 7:30. So the heel of my thumb comes up and over and just presses down at something like a 45-degree angle to bring that back down into kind of a baseball shape. Make sure you've got enough slip on there to approach it again. It feels fine, so I'm going to do this again, bringing my right hand in, so it's a little bit harder to see on the video, but I think you can see the clay coming up between my fingers into this point, and that is getting the clay particles centered. So we'll bring it back down again. This part, sometimes I call this wedging on the wheel. So it's a secondary conditioning step to get everything, all the clay particles kind of going in the right direction and everything really centered. So we'll go a third time. Usually 3 times doing this is sufficient. So you bring it up to 2 or 3 times its original height, bring it right back down, and again this is the 3rd time, so I think we're going to call that good. And so now this is kind of like the base condition. I think that the clay is about twice as wide as it is tall, something like that. I'm going to keep my work area clean, wipe up that little slip. Now porcelain gets very dry on the surface pretty easily. Stoneware is a little more forgiving. But with either one, the main thing is to keep just a few drops of water on it at all times. Now, the next step that I want to do, since I've got the clay centered and in the base shape, is I want to find the center. So I'm using the thumb on my left hand and the index finger on my right hand, and I'm just kind of feeling for the center. I've got it there. Now I'll push down a little bit. I want to have a damp sponge ready to keep a few drops of water in there. You want that to be nice and well lubricated as you push down to the bottom of the pot. Now, the bottom of the pot is not the same as going all the way down to the bat. You want to have some kind of a bottom to your piece. So you want to leave about 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch of clay at the bottom. It depends on what you're making, but that's a good starting range. If you leave a thicker bottom, you can always trim some of that later. Now, every time I make a serious move with the clay, I like to just kind of do a little bit of work on the lip just to make sure that it doesn't get splits or unevenness. So now I've pushed all the way down to my bottom position, and now I'm taking both of my index fingers. Notice that my arms are still anchored on my legs. My index fingers just pull straight toward me, and I'm extending the bottom of the pot to whatever size I want to have it be when the pot is all done. So this inside forming of the pot, that is what the bottom is going to be, and that's as wide as the bottom is going to be when this is all done. You can alter it a little bit when you pull it up, but pretty much that's what you're trying to achieve, is to form the inside bottom and be more or less done with it. Now that I've got the pot opened, as I said, let's go back and just do a little bit of cleanup on the lip. You want to make sure it doesn't get any splits, it stays nice and even. Can't do too much of that, so I pretty much every time I make a major move with the clay, I go back and heal the lip. Now I'm ready to do what's called a pull. Before I do my first pull, this motion might be a little bit difficult to really see, but I'm going to try to explain it. I'm going to put a little bit of water on the clay, and I'm just going to use the fingertips of both hands. And so my pinky fingers are right down there at the bottom. That should be a nice sharp corner. I'm trying to pull everything evenly, but kind of over on itself a little bit. You'll see when I remove my hands that I've brought it just kind of in and a little bit inward shaped. It's much easier to work on a shape like this than when it starts to go the other direction. It's kind of game over. You're committed to making a bowl without some higher level skills anyway. So now that I've got it, let's call that consolidated, I am going to do a proper pull. So just a couple drops of water on there. Now I'm using the middle finger of my left hand, and I'm working at approximately 3 o'clock. You know, it might be 3:30, but right over here on the right side as I'm sitting. So this middle finger just goes down and finds that corner. This is when you realize, oh yeah, I should have made the bottom nice and flat with a sharp corner. So you feel for that corner, and then the index finger on my right hand goes all the way to the bottom where the clay connects to the bat, and you just push in. Now I'm going to say that's going in about 1/8 of an inch. So just kind of keep everything at a nice moisture level. I'm going to now, these two fingers are kind of opposite each other on the two sides of the clay at about this orientation. So this finger on the inside is pulling a little bit of clay up, and this finger on the outside is pulling a little bit of clay up. But notice that both of my hands are locked together as one. They're locked at the thumbs and they're locked at the forefingers. So I'm pulling up both hands at exactly the same time, making a kind of a spiral from the bottom to the top. I stop just a little bit short of the top, so I'm gonna go and smooth that off. You want the top to remain just a little bit thicker. You don't want to get a feather edge right at the top, so just bulk that up a little bit, heal that lip. Now that was the first pull. The first pull is always a suggestion. You're really just kind of telling the clay, hey, we're going to start doing this. The second pull is usually much more dramatic, but it's exactly the same thing. I begin this pinch, and then I pull the clay up. Notice that it's a one continuous, very slow spiral. So I'm allowing the clay to go around multiple times in this very tight spiral pattern. And again, I stop just short of the very top. And so I probably increased the height by 50% that time, and that's really good. So go back and smooth out the lip, and then we'll try another pull. With my sponge, I can dip down in there and make sure that I don't get standing water in the bottom. If you have standing water in the bottom of your pot, that water is going to soak into the clay, and it will soften that, and it'll make that clay swell. And then later on, when it shrinks, when that dries up, it'll shrink more than normal, and you're guaranteed to have a crack in the bottom. So you want to keep that dry as you go. Now you're constantly adding water and taking it away in a kind of a game to keep it just right. So now I've got it dried up. I'm going to put a couple drops of water on there again, and we'll do our next pull. So really trying to make sure that we bring all of that extra clay from the bottom up to the top. And we'd like the walls to be nice and even for sure. Okay, so I can probably get a little bit more out of this, but let me take a ruler and see how I'm doing with it so far. So that's about 3.5 inches. I should be able to easily get a 4-inch cylinder out of a 1 pound ball. So that means we can go back for a little bit more. There must be extra clay down there at the bottom. So again, a pull is exactly the same thing. Now my finger needs to be able to extend down to the bottom, and it just can. When you get taller shapes, there are other kind of things that you have to do, but we're not going to talk about that just yet. So I can reach down to the bottom. I'm going to really dig this time and try to get all of that extra thick clay to come right up to the top. And you want to try to keep it going as straight as possible. There's a tendency to flare out if you're not careful when you're doing that pull action. So let me just dry this up and measure it one more time. So that is about 4.5 inches out of 1 pound of porcelain. So if I can do that with a pound of porcelain, pretty much anybody should be able to do that more easily with a pound of stoneware. So that will be an upcoming assignment. But for now, that is a cylinder. And one of the things that is fun to do when you do this kind of as an exercise is to say, what happens if we cut it open? So we can do that and pull out the other half. And so here you can see that there still is quite a bit of clay down here. So if I had been determined, I probably could have dug a little deeper. Notice that it kind of angles in, so that's a little deceptive. It was pretty straight on the outside, but a little angled on the inside. So one way or another, I'm sure I could have gotten another 1/2 inch or more out of the height. But you want nice even wall thickness as you go up. It looks like this is getting thinner to some degree as it goes, but right at the very top, you can see that the lip is just a little bit extra fat there to maintain some structural strength. So that is it. That is the basic introduction to throwing. There is a lot of muscle memory that's involved in this task. So when people sit down and try this for the first time, do this. Get a whole bat full of balls of clay so that you can just keep going, do one after another, and practice. Do 10 at a time, do 20 at a time. You know, clay is 100% recyclable, so there's no problem in using too much. We'll just let it dry out and use it again. So practice. You know, with the amount of years I've been doing this, it looks kind of simple, but I guarantee everybody that when you sit down and try this, you're going to find 10 or 15 ways that it's not what you expected. So stick with it, and that's my best advice. You just have to spend a lot of hours with it. All right, thanks. That's it.